Thank you very much for that, Nick. We'll move now swiftly on to the items under debate today, and we'll move straight on to item 1, which is planning application number 21/0017, Voreda House in Penrith. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Morning again, members. So this is agenda item 1, which is a full planning application for a passive house standard retrofit to the existing office building, involving demolition and replacement of external cladding, demolition and replacement of the external staircase, stairwells, and the creation of external service zone with an extension of the ground floor area to match the upper floors at Voreda House in Penrith. This application is before you, members, as this is an Eden District Council own planning application. If I may, Chair, I'm sure most members are probably familiar with Voreda House, given its close proximity to Town Hall and its positioning within Penrith. However, I'd just like to go through a few slides, first of all, just to show the design as proposed, and also just to familiarise members with the building, should anyone not be familiar with that. Again, members, my sincere apologies. The usual standard gubbins for myself. Obviously, I do have some temperamental rural internet connectivity issues at times. So if at any point in time I'm discussing a slide that doesn't correlate with what you're seeing on screen, if I'm ahead of you, do please let me know. So, as always, members, the application site is the area of land highlighted in red before you. Obviously, in this instance, Voreda House is an existing building. So again, you can see the building and its existing footprint shaded in the middle of the red line boundary. You can see the site's relationship with regards to the Town Hall to the southwest, obviously Portland Place, Meeting House Lane, the roads immediately adjacent. You can also make reference to, in the committee report itself, there's reference to the Methodist Church as a Grade 2 listed building, which is to the northwest. You can see Wordsworth Terrace on the opposite side of Meeting House Lane, which again are listed buildings. And again, members, to the southeast is the current police headquarters. Just to give a bit of context as to where this kind of sits within Penrith. Again, apologies, I'm sure members are more than au fait with the building itself, but this just gives you a wider impression of how that building relates to the wider settlement. So, members, this slide before you shows the proposed elevations of the building. Obviously, all the details of the construction and the materials are detailed within the report before you, but these are the 4 elevations of the building as proposed and as would appear if this application were to be approved today. So you can see the external cladding, you can see the external colour scheme that's proposed, the window fenestration and openings, and as I will come on to from some of the slides when we show the existing buildings, you can make out some of the external alterations to the building from its present appearance. Next couple of slides just show some of the floor plans. So the floor plans as provided at the moment, and you can see the existing site arrangements in terms of the access, some of the plantings that will take place. Then we have the proposed ground floor and first floor plans for you again, members. Hopefully you can make out the detail that they contain. And then finally, we have the proposed second floor and the roof plan. Just for reference, members, on the plan to the right, the roof plan, what you can see before you there are the proposed photovoltaic cells, which are proposed for the roof of the building, which again has been detailed within the report before you. Now, these next couple of slides are photo montages which are being produced by the applicant to try and give you an impression of how the building would sit, how it would look and how it would feel in the street scene, again, if the application will be to be approved. So here you can see the building taken from the junction and the mini roundabout where Drovers Lane comes into the site. So again, you can see the appearance of the building. That elevation shows, as you'll see from some of the slides, one of the changes. And you'll see the external, so the staircase that presently exists, which has been altered. It gives you an impression of the cladding, the window fenestration, how it would appear, and also the roof with the photovoltaic cells on. This next image is taken from along Portland Place. So again, if you're driving along Portland Place, you can make out the building and again how it would appear, giving it a bit of context in relation to Coronation Gardens, which is the treed and the vegetated area just in that slide. This next slide is from Wordsworth Terrace. So again, this is how the building would appear when driving along the road. So again, you can see the proposed fenestration, you can see the proposed alterations to the building and the cladding and the colour tone that again is proposed through this application. And then finally, again, how the site would be viewed, sort of looking northeast from Wordsworth Street. Just as a point of reference, members, again, I'm sure you're all more than familiar with the building itself. The next few slides just show how the building presently exists, so you can get a bit of context from the previous slides as to how the building would look as opposed to how it presently appears. So this photograph is taken from Meeting House Lane. So again, you can see the external appearance of the building in its present state. This view is taken from within the existing car park at Voreda House. So again, looking at that rear elevation. This next slide is taken from the mini roundabout. So again, looking at Voreda House from that sort of junction with Drovers Lane, Portland Place. So again, you can see the existing staircase and stairwell, which would obviously be altered in addition to the other external alterations to the appearance of the building. This photograph, apologies, it's difficult to get the entirety of the car park in, but obviously reference is made in the report to Drovers Lane car park, which sits immediately adjacent to the site. And this is just to give you a bit of an impression of the existing car park that exists, which would be used jointly by members of the public and also by staff associated with the Voreda House were this to be approved. And again, a final view sort of Voreda House looking from Portland Place. This is how the site would be viewed, as the building is viewed, from the Drovers Lane car park. So again, you can get an understanding again and a further appreciation of its current appearance, the window fenestrations, the external materials used in its construction. This next slide is taken from Voreda House and it shows the relationship. You can make out Town Hall, the rear of Town Hall just appearing on the left hand side. It also shows the Coronation Gardens and the existing boundary wall that presently is in place between Coronation Gardens and Voreda House. Now reference is made to the wall in the report itself. And has been subject of comments by the Friends of Coronation Gardens. So again, this is just to give you an opinion, an impression of how that wall presently sits and relates between the two sites. And again, this is taken back. You can see Voreda House there, and again, this is the wall and the top part of that of the Coronation Gardens. Just a few points of reference to some of the listed buildings which are immediately within the immediate vicinity of the building. So this is the Methodist Church, which is referred to within the report. Again, a grade 2 listed building. Meeting House Terrace, which again contains a terrace row of listed buildings. And again, for context, you can make out the Methodist Church just in the background of that photograph. Thank you, Chair. If I may, I just want to say a few more words before we pass over to the speakers.
Yeah.
My apologies. I don't know. Am I still showing the screen there? Sorry, apologies if I.
No, you're okay now, Nick.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So members, the application would involve a retrofit of Voreda House to create a new civic building for use by Eden District Council. The refit, as you've seen from the slides, would alter the external appearance of the building whilst also creating a zero carbon office. I won't go over the full details of all the changes that are proposed, but they are set out in full within section 2.1 of the report before you. Now, the application does not involve a change of use of the building from its existing office use, and therefore, members, in this regard, the main considerations before you today are the appropriateness of the external alterations proposed to the appearance of the building and the resultant impacts that would arise to the character of the wider area. As you've seen from the slides, the existing appearance of Voreda House is of limited architectural merit, which in the opinion of officers detracts quite significantly from the appearance, character and setting of the conservation area in which it is located. The proposal does significantly alter does not significantly alter the existing size, scale or massing of the building, but would result in a more modern and contemporary appearance. In relation to the design of the building, this will undoubtedly divide and split opinion, members, as design is an entirely subjective consideration. The appearance of Voreda House as proposed would not be traditional if this application was approved. However, there is no requirement within the Eden local plan for this to necessarily be the case. The design of the building has been proposed by the applicant to both improve the appearance of the building from its existing form and appearance, whilst also achieving a carbon neutral / passive house standard. The design of the new building is considered to represent an improvement to the existing appearance of Voreda House as it presently exists, and as such enhancing its appearance in the street scene and the locality. Furthermore, in relation to the historic environment, the alterations to the building can reasonably be said to preserve and enhance the character of the surrounding conservation area and the setting of the nearby listed buildings, which is the main policy test within the local plan in this instance. Now, this view is an opinion of officers, but it's also supported by the council's conservation officer, who has worked with the applicant, leading to the final design that is now proposed that they are satisfied with. As such, it is considered that the design of the building is appropriate, would result in a visual improvement to the appearance of the building, and can be considered to be in accordance with the development plan policies for that reason. In relation to impacts of the development upon neighbouring amenity, it is again considered that the building would improve the visual amenity of the local area to the benefit of neighbouring dwellings. The design does not materially alter the physical relationship of the building to any nearby dwellings, nor result in any appreciably greater outlook from the building to any such properties. In this regard, the development preserves the amenity of neighbouring dwellings from the existing position that presently exists. On matters relating to highways impacts and access, it is noted in the report that much of the existing parking provision which is presently provided at Voreda House would be lost as a result of the alterations to the building. This instead will be replaced by the mixed use of Drovers Lane car park, which would be a mixture between public and use by staff associated with Voreda House, with improved access being created between the two. In this regard, it's also noted that Cumbria County Council, as the local highway authority, have raised no objections or concerns with this proposal. Finally, concerns have been expressed with regards to the impact of the development upon the adjacent Coronation Gardens, which again you've seen from the slide. The details of those concerns are set out within section 5.6 of the report before you, members. Whilst these comments and concerns are duly noted, it is considered that the minor reduction in the height of the boundary wall between the gardens and Voreda House would not result in any adverse impacts upon the use or enjoyment of this important public space. The slight reduction would open up greater views to Voreda House, specifically to the green wall and elevation proposed, and this area of green space would, in our opinion, create an improved visual backdrop and also resulting in a better visual link between this green elevation of the building and the existing gardens. Overall, members, whilst it's noted that the design of the building again will obviously split opinion, the considerations relevant to this application are whether or not you consider the proposed alterations to Voreda House. Do you consider they improve the appearance of the building from its current form, and whether you think this would preserve or enhance the character setting and appearance of the conservation area, whilst also achieving a carbon neutral building. In the opinion of officers and the council's conservation officer, the application does achieve this and as such warrants approval. The development would result in no adverse impacts upon neighbouring amenity, with no objections having been received to this effect from any neighbouring properties. It would result in no adverse impacts upon the local highway network, with no objections being raised by the Highway Authority, and in all other regards would result in no adverse harm being created, with no objections being raised from any statutory consultee. Therefore, members, the application is considered to be an appropriate development, which is in accordance with the development plan and the National Planning Policy Framework, and therefore the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out within section 1 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nick. I would now, can you please call up the speaker, the objector, Councillor Jonathan Davis, please.
Calling now, Chair.
Hello.
Good morning, Councillor Davies.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's William Patterson here, Chair of the Planning Committee. You have 5 minutes in which to address the committee, and your time starts now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've obviously put forward the written objections to the application of Voreda House by Eden Council, and I won't waste members' time by going over too many of them. I've had a representation as a local town councillor by a number of residents on the application with concerns about the design and the impacts, given that the Voreda House building does sit in a conservation zone, and the impact of the changing that doesn't match in with the surrounding buildings in both colour and design. The application is billed as being originally zero carbon, as has been mentioned in the officer's statement, a carbon neutral building, yet the design statements all refer to Voreda House as a net zero carbon development now. So the application is proposing to retrofit the building that with some coloured cladding that has been likened to Lego bricks in the middle of the town by some residents. The cladding is an area of great concern that, having read in a response to the conservation officer, a line in there reads, the cladding also has to be robust, suitable, and I emphasise the words used, and ideally fireproof. Now, as a planning application, I would think that Eden Council would have to consider the safety of the building and the plans put forward, and to see the words ideally fireproof in reference to cladding on any building, let alone a public building, is very concerning to both myself and others. The plans put forward for the internal redevelopment of Voreda House include opening up both floors as open plan, removing any potential internal fire shielding created by the existing walls within the building, yet there appears to be no additional fire escapes included within the plans put forward for Voreda House, taking into account the fact that the building will now be open plan with cladding that, as we know, has massive issues on some properties. And this alone, we feel, should be cause for concern that the application should be considered for refusal based on the fact that it poses a risk to the general public and neighbouring properties. Beyond that, there's also the visual impact that the cladding will have in the local area, with part of the proposal to remove a tree on Meeting House Lane that, although at this moment in time doesn't shield the building fully from public view, it definitely creates a degree of visual neutralisation of the building's impact on Meeting House Lane. Beyond that, obviously, Planning Committee have got to consider the legals of the application put forward. Now, given that this application has been put forward by the authority that the committee represents, We feel that also there is grounds that this application could be called in with the Secretary of State based on the fact that the officers are employees of the council. And as a result of that, the officers' report and opinion could give that it could be biased. We're also aware of the fact that there has been some attempts politically to influence the outcome of today's committee by the attempts to replace a member of the committee, which gives us grounds also to use the opinion that political bias in the decision made today may well be the case. And I'll inform the committee that should this application be approved, we will be requesting Secretary of State considers calling in this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davies. And now we also have Mr. Hughes, the agent for the applicant.
Calling now, Chair.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Hughes.
Hello.
Hello there. It's William Patterson here, who's chair of the Planning Committee, and you now have 5 minutes in which to address the committee, starting now, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Rod Hughes, Director of 2030 Architects Limited, based in Penrith. We specialise in sustainable design and are committed to this initiative by Eden District Council to produce a net zero carbon project, particularly with an existing building. The committee is assessing the planning implications for the retrofit design of Voreda House for Eden District Council's new office space. As the scheme is a refurbishment, the siting, scale, massing and form of the building remain virtually the same as existing. The main planning issue is the proposed external cladding of the building and the reorganisation of windows. The proposed scheme will replace the existing concrete cladding panels with a new highly insulated and fire-rated external timber frame wall, which will be faced externally with non-combustible coloured panels made from compressed mineral fibre. This will comply with all relevant fire regulations for this building type. Early discussions with the planning department helped to define the range of cladding materials that would be considered appropriate in this location, and the rock-clad material presented today was one of those materials. We note that only 2 formal objections to the scheme have been submitted, and in response to their specific concerns, we can state that the visual impact of the proposed photovoltaic array from Beacon Edge will be insignificant. There will be no light loss to pedestrians as a result of the increasing ground floor area. There will be electric vehicle points provided in Drovers Lane car park, and there will be secure bike storage provided on site. With regard to horizontal wind turbines, they are considered to be ineffective in an urban environment and detrimental to the building fabric, and the use of active algae external cladding, which was suggested, is used to produce oxygen, not heat, and is still largely experimental in its application. It also has an unattractive appearance and is very high cost. The general appearance and cladding concerns are addressed later in this presentation. The scheme in front of you represents the UK's first large commercial passive house standard office retrofit and was developed from an earlier feasibility study completed in August 2020, which confirmed that a net zero carbon building was possible. This is a significant achievement and enabled EDC to bid successfully for a substantial grant of over £800,000 earlier this year. This scheme is not a sticking plaster eco badge, as some have described it. It is a serious and committed leading edge design responding positively to the climate emergency which affects us all. In addition, the refurbished building will provide a very high quality office environment with standards of comfort, indoor air quality and ventilation far above the normal commercial office environment. This is essential in providing a safe working environment post-COVID and an attractive and productive working environment for the future. It is worth emphasising that as this building is being procured through a design and build process, The detailed design of this building is still in progress and will continue to be so for the first few months after a contract has been let. This means that the internal floor plan arrangements in front of you are indicative only. We have already developed alternative internal plan arrangements for the ground floor to provide a full council chamber and committee rooms as part of a flexible meeting space suite, with a dedicated members area providing a single base for council business. This will create a much closer link to customers and partners, which will support members' roles as community leaders. If, as the design develops, changes are required, these will be dealt with under separate planning applications as non-material amendments. We have had constructive dialogue with the Conservation Officer and Planning Department to respond to concerns about the potential impact within the conservation area. Our approach has always been informed by the philosophy that the contemporary design interventions should not mimic or reproduce the existing historic context, but rather demonstrate honest, sympathetic use of modern materials to avoid pastiche and reproduction. We have therefore developed a simple contemporary cladding design that we believe responds positively to the existing context. The cladding uses 2 tones of green and a subtle faceting of the panels to create interest and variety to the facades. This is contrasted by the deep-set window reveals, which are clad in a complementary orange-red colour. To further reduce the scale of the building, windows have been organised into vertical bays, reminiscent of the surrounding residential buildings. There are also external steel lattice structures that will support the growth of a green wall on the Coronation Gardens elevation and also Wordsworth Terrace. We realise that the proposed elevational treatment will divide opinion, but we are confident that in a few years the living wall will have softened the bulk of the building and the cladding will have become the accepted face of Eden District Council. I am proud to be able to present this exemplar scheme for consideration and trust that the committee feel able to support the UK's first large commercial passive house standard office retrofit and net zero carbon project in support of the stated aims of Her Majesty's Government and the Eden District Council to decarbonise our economy. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of the application.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Hughes. Now moving on, have we any, is there anything, Nick, you would like to say before we go into questions?
Chair, can I just jump in there? There's a couple of points of law really that I need to pick up on, particularly from the representations made by Mr. Davies. So I just want to clarify a few things for the avoidance of doubt, and so that members are clear. This application is before members, and they do have jurisdiction to determine this application, notwithstanding that it is an application made by the local authority. And we have power to do that under Regulation 3 of the Town and Country Planning General Regulations as amended by subsequent amendment regulations in 2018. So we do have that power to determine this application. The suggestion that there is in any way bias by our professional officers is entirely unfounded and totally inappropriate. Our officers are professionals. Our statutory role as local planning authority is entirely separate to the separate decisions made by council, by Eden District Council in relation to this matter. It's a separate statutory process, and our officers are not there's no basis for them to be subject to the comments made by Mr. Davies in terms of bias. So I would just advise members to have regard to the report before them as the advice of our professional planning officers and come to their own conclusions as they're entitled to do. In terms of coming before committee, our constitution secures that these applications where material planning grounds are given in objections come before committee to ensure a robust decision-making process, and that is why the application is before members today with a report from our professional planning officers. Finally, just a small point, Mr. Davies referred to cladding and various other things which actually would form part of the separate building regulations regime undertaken by the council. And I think in terms of those points, I hope this clarifies for members their position on this application. Obviously, they're entitled to take a different view to the officer report, as is Mr. Davies, and I would just advise that they do so on the planning merits and not on other irrelevant and dubious matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Rebecca. Nick, I'll come to you first. Is there anything you would like to add from the speaker's comments?
Not No, not really, Chair. I mean, I was going to make a few points, but I think Rebecca's very, very kindly and far more eloquently than myself sort of picked up on each and every point I was going to raise, to be honest. So there's nothing further to add there. I think the only thing I would probably maybe just say is that in terms of the call into the Secretary of State, obviously the member of the public is able to make that request themselves, but as an authority, there's no requirement for us to do so as a determining authority in this occasion. But no, otherwise, as per Rebecca's comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Nick. We'll carry straight on to the questions then, Rebecca. Who have we got first?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wicks.
Councillor Wicks, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I shall keep it brief. The officer noted the impact on the local amenity would be minimal. I would say that's unclear as we've got no noise or lighting assessment. But my question is that in the report 2.1.7, it says creation of 2 dedicated accessible parking bays, whereas in the previous 2.1.5, it says creation of 4 disabled parking bays. Can you just clear that up for me?
My apologies, Councillor, for that error. I believe it is actually 2, but I'll try and double check that from the application details and confirm that before we get into debate, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll move on to the next question then, Rebecca.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Hi, Nick. Mine's a car parking one as well. Drovers Lane car park. How many parking spaces are there going to be for in total? You talk of sharing them with the public, but how many are there going to be in total? Is it a total of 104 there at the moment?
Yes, my understanding is that is as the present provision provides, is that number. Yes, there wouldn't be any additional parking spaces created in Drovers Lane car park. Just to be clear, the only alterations to that car park would be if you imagine Voreda House at the moment and you walk into the site, you technically can't get between. If you're in a car, you can't technically get between Voreda House and Drovers Lane car park because there's a barrier to prevent it. So there would be an access point created through, but the number of spaces would stay the same. The difference would be it'll be a mixture of, at the moment it's open for members of the public, it would still be open for members of the public, but also it would be there as provision for staff associated with the use of Voreda House.
So can I just ask, so Drovers Lane car park, just to get the right, that's without going through to the town hall part where we as members used to park. That's without going through that. That is just the initial part next to where the police station is and Voreda House. It doesn't go through that other entrance. No,
that's right. So there's no connectivity at the moment between town hall and the Voreda House or town hall and Drovers Lane car park, and that wouldn't alter as a result of this application. The link that would be created would just simply be enabling vehicle access between Drovers Lane car park and Voreda House, because at the moment you can't physically get through there. There's a ramp, the road comes in, but there's a barrier that would sort of prevent any access to it. I believe the car park is actually slightly lower down topographically than Voreda House, so there'll be a ramp link between the two, but the number of spaces would remain the same.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who's next? Who have we got next? Oh, Councillor Ross.
Councillor Ross. Yeah.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you very much. I may have missed it when we got the slides, but I'd be grateful if Mr. Atkinson, if you could show us again whether there's an artist impression or one of the images that shows the location and the extent of the green wall that's proposed. I believe will be the backdrop or the side facing Coronation Gardens, and provide that backdrop just so that we can see it in relation both to the view from the Coronation Garden but also the proposed wall there.
Of course, if you can bear with me 1 second, I'll just get the slide presentation back up. Right, can you, apologies, my internet's usually a little bit behind. Can you see that slide before you. It should be the photo montage, the artist impression.
Yes, thank you.
So that's the green. Oh, just give me 1 second. Let's get the point of it. So this is the green wall elevation that is proposed. So obviously you can make out. Hopefully you can see the pointer. You can make out the between the window fenestrations. Obviously it doesn't cover the windows. You can make out the green wall elements to it in between those elevations. So this area in the foreground here. This is Coronation Gardens, and Town Hall would be kind of further back. Obviously, Voreda House as presently exists, so it's this elevation that the green wall would be on, facing towards the trees, which I appreciate from this photo montage is probably taken in the winter months. So that's how it would relate through. So the wall, again, you can see the wall here. It would be slightly reduced. The wall is still to be retained. The report details how much that kind of comes down. So what it does is it still enables, in our opinion, the degree of kind of privacy that I think people who use the park do find important. There is no link through, so it's not opening up or taking that wall down or any section of it. It's removing the height of it, reducing the height of it slightly to enable that sort of backdrop of the kind of green wall, and obviously the plantings around the site to give a kind of a bit of a theme through, a green theme linking Coronation Gardens with that green wall elevation. Now obviously that green wall will take some time to develop. You know, I don't think anybody's suggesting that will be planted and will appear that way. It will take some time for that to sort of mature to probably as it's seen in that photograph. But I hope does that answer your questions, Councillor?
Yes, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Lynch.
Councillor Lynch. You're muted. You're away now.
In 8.7.9, the final paragraph, so the applicant has confirmed that the passive house analysis confirmed that space heating demand could be reduced. Shouldn't it? Could be. That's a bit speculative, isn't it?
Ultimately, the internal elements and the degree of the carbon neutrality, there obviously is subject to some design changes because the final design of the internal layout of the building is not 100% known as of yet. But ultimately, those matters relating to the internal layout have some weight insofar as the overall sort of kind of carbon neutrality that's approved. But obviously, in order to reach that passive house standard, they are the level of emissions and level of savings that would need to be created.
Well, what's your point in putting this 80 to 90%? Because it's unknowable, isn't it?
Say that again, Councillor.
Well, that's a figure that's not known. It's highly speculative.
Some elements of the
80 to 90%, but might be 50 to 60%. Would you accept that?
You're entitled to your views, Councillor. That's what the applicant has put forward. It is subject to change depending upon some of the internal configurations of the building.
Thank you. And my second question is, this passive house process design is a Swedish design, isn't it?
I don't know the full ins and outs about where it originated from. I mean, it is a national standard.
My understanding is that they actually to use passive house, you have to import timber from Sweden.
I don't know that's necessarily the case, Councillor, but I must confess the origins where this came from, what has to be achieved. It is a passive house standard is a national standard for the construction industry across the country. The full ins and outs of how that is achieved in terms of where you have to source materials from, I would be lying to you if I said I knew the full answer to that. So I can't entirely answer the question for you, but it is a national standard that is that is recognised throughout the country.
And don't you think it's a bit I'm trying to find the right word. We've been used as a guinea pig to design a building like this for commercial use. I think it'd been better to wait until you've been proven, because it might be a disaster.
I'm not sure that's necessarily a question there. It was more of a statement. At the end of the day, councillor, there is a passive house standard is a standard that's recognised in the building trade. That's what the applicant is suggesting will be achieved in this instance. So fundamentally, that is what's before you. Whether you have your views them as being guinea pigs out, that's not entirely relevant to the consideration of this application, I'm afraid, councillor.
I think it is. Okay.
Thank you. Moving on.
Councillor Holden.
Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 or 3 questions. So, Nick, first of all, if you could just refer back to your slides. The mesh window surrounds mentioned on page 30, 4.2, the Parish Town Council wanted to have some foliage to concour some green growth, and these face north. And I'm not entirely sure I understood where they were. The mesh window surrounds, they were supposed to soften that northern facade. That question might also, there's another question, but it might also be solved with the same slide. I just wonder where the bin storage was and where the cycle store was on the plan. Thank you.
My apologies, councillor. I put myself on mute there before I put these slides. I do apologise. I'll just go back to the slides if I may.
Got there at the north. Oh.
Should be going back any second.
Yeah.
So this is the north elevation as would appear. So obviously in terms of the window surrounds, you can see these from on this slide. So again, we've got kind of window openings. You have these some of the surrounds around. So this is how the building would look, and the window openings would appear.
Oh, I see.
I think the town council's reference was to trying to have some additional green plantings on there. Now that's not proposed through this application.
Okay.
The only green elevation would be on the rear elevation that we showed previously in response to Councillor Ross's question. So it is just that one elevation that would have greenery
right,
on the
so no green foliage with the mesh around the mesh. I did wonder how that might pan out. Whilst I got that slide, I mean there is a mention of a footpath or a wall at the bottom, because there's I know at the moment there's a lot of greenery sort of almost edging onto the building and causing damp problems, it said in the report. So I just wonder what will happen to this green flower bed, and will there be a path between the wall and the building?
I don't believe that there is necessarily a path in between. So I suppose you're probably referring to this section here.
Yes, I am.
I mean, there will be obviously a slight gap between the two for maintenance purposes, but in terms of kind of paths, right, as in sort of public access, no, that will be obtained by the existing pavement that kind of presently exists and goes round. But okay, so that yes, would be for maintenance wise, there will be a gap, but that wouldn't necessarily be
an award.
Yeah,
prevent the dampness. That's good. And there was going to be a tree planted there, isn't there, to replace the pine tree that's being taken out?
There are some additional plantings around the site. Yes.
Yeah. Just another couple of questions, if you don't mind. The photovoltaic cells on the roof. There is a reference from the conservation officer to say that they're not visible from I presume from pedestrians. They're not visible on the roof. Now, that's fine. I'm just wondering what the conservation policy is about photovoltaic cells on roofs in the conservation area.
I don't think our policy necessarily goes into kind of that much detail about the photovoltaics on roofs. I mean, ultimately, roofs are an important feature within conservation areas, and sort of the roof lines they do play an important part in character. The policy doesn't go into quite that much detail. You won't. I think obviously you're looking at a photo montage at the moment of the building. So as you can see there, you wouldn't see the photovoltaic cells from the streets and the conservation area itself. However, one of the objectives to the application has rightly pointed out that I suppose if you are further up on say somewhere like Beacon Edge, obviously you'll be able to look down towards the roof. They are flatter with the roof as opposed to being sort of elevated up. So from the street scene and probably from the immediate conservation area, you won't see them. From other more elevated positions within Penrith, you probably will be able to see them within the context of the design of the building as is.
Yeah, flat roof, right. Did we get the waste bin storage where that was and the cycle store on the site?
They will be on the, just 1 second, Councillor. I think they are detailed on the site plans, although I must confess I can't immediately recall that to mind. So I would have to, that's something I would probably have to confirm for you, Councillor, if I may do.
Yeah, just want to make sure that there is adequate storage space for the waste paper bins, because they can look a bit unsightly, can't they, all lined up against an external wall or something.
Yes, that's right.
So whilst you've got that slide up, cycle storage, is that, oh, there, is it on the sort of top of that slide near to the disabled car parking slots to the left? Yes, right.
It is. Sorry, my apologies. Yes.
Just a bit of clarification, because I was a bit confused, because there's this access, and I presumed it was pedestrian access to the Drovers Lane car park, but you mentioned about vehicle access. Is that right?
Sorry, my apologies. It will be foot access to. So the access to Drovers Lane car park is as presently exists. And my apologies. I think I might have made in my reference there. There would be an access and a ramp put between Voreda House and Drovers Lane car park to enable that, but you are completely right. My sincere apologies. That would be foot access through to enable, obviously, a flow between the two, so people don't have to come out onto the road, but also to enable sort of access for those with less mobility.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Question about the car park as well. Has it been taken into consideration? I believe there are permits, annual permits for people to park on the Drovers Lane car park, where obviously limited parking in the main area of town, WL lines and everything. Have those spaces been taken into account to say how much space there actually is available for public and staff parking?
So matters relating to permits and parking, that's not relevant to the determination of this application. It doesn't form part of the considerations. What we have is ultimately the position in terms of parking you need to consider is, as it presently stands, Voreda House has, the number of spaces that it does, which is probably not ideal for modern standards, but it is a lawful position. Now, many of those will be lost to enable the retrofit. So that existing provision is basically being transferred from Voreda House into the Drovers Lane car park. So it will be a mixture of uses. It will be still open to members of the during the day and at weekends, and that's been confirmed in the report. It will also be available for use by members of staff. So the permits not relevant. I suppose it's impossible to say how many spaces will be taken by staff, how many will not, because that's not something that's physically able to be controlled.
So it's an unknown then. Okay then. And last question, which may seem a bit ridiculous, but I'll ask it anyway. The lift in the building is sort of in that external outbuilding, that tower, isn't it? I think the lift to all the different floors.
Yes. In
the building. And it is a stupid question, but I know there's been experience for me in other buildings that no insulation was provided and the lift wouldn't work in the cold weather. So I'm just going to ask the question, will it be insulated well, the tower where the lift is, so it can be used throughout the year?
I mean, two points. That one, it's not that the installation of the lift is not a material consideration for this application, but obviously the overall building will be insulated and fitted. So I can't comment on the temperature of the lift and whether it will work, but I'd say that's not relevant to the determination of this application, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. I won't go into the boundary wall. I think I've seen the pictures, and there were railings, I think, or something along the top of the boundary wall to the Coronation Gardens. Yeah, I'm right.
So that will be retained. It will just be reduced in height, as set out in the report.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your answers.
Nick, can I just confirm for clarity for members, obviously, because I know there's a couple of questions about parking, that we have consulted with planning policy on this, and they have confirmed that it complies with the parking management strategy, which was approved by members in executive committee on the 15th September 2020 and doesn't conflict with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, parking's twofold. The primary consideration is ultimately the parking strategy that's referred to is not actually a material consideration for this application. The consideration, it doesn't form part of the development plan, and it isn't something we would need to otherwise take into account technically. Now, the County Council have been consulted on this application, and from a highway safety access capacity perspective, there is absolutely no objection being raised by the Highway Authority. But yes, you are quite right. We have still looked to consider the potential impact of the use of Drovers Lane in relation to the Penrith Parking and Movement study. And I think if I can, anybody who has any queries on that, if we can just direct you to page 32, bottom of, going into page 33, that's the response has been provided by our sort of local policy team, and specifically at the very end of that comment on page 34, that is incorporated and included in full. In conclusion, the parking arrangements proposed by the above planning application are not considered to conflict with the aims and objectives of the PPMS, which is again the Penrith Parking and Movement Study. So I hope that answers the question there, Rebecca.
Yeah, it was just to assist to members with any queries they might have. Councillor Clark.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I just found out the passive house, as its spelling suggests, was developed in Germany in the 1990s. Could it possibly be considered now out of date, or is it still the international standard, or have any revisions been made to it?
It's not out of date, no, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Councillor Ryland.
Councillor Ryland.
Thank you, Chair. A question for the Chief Planning Officer. Could I ask who advised on the planting, please?
So obviously the applicant has put forward the planting proposals. We have considered it from the Conservation Officer's perspective, from ourselves as planning officers, and we do employ an arboricultural officer who, granted their primary focus has been more on the impact on the trees that presently exist at Coronation Gardens, but there has been some considerations around the plantings, which we consider to be appropriate. However, again, that's, you know, if that's something that you do not agree on, then that is obviously a view you're entitled to arrive at. So it's kind of been considered as part of the overall design and appearance of the building and how that fits into the conservation area.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any further questions, councillors? Got no further questions at the moment, Chair. Oh, Chair, sorry, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, well, I'll look to invite a proposal. Do you want to see Councillor Ross coming forward?
So possibly, yeah, we have Councillor Ross, Chair.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to propose approval of this application. I think it's an extremely exciting project that will transform a dull and soulless and functionally substandard existing building that I think otherwise has little sort of attraction for future uses. I think it will result in a living and breathing building that will provide a positive and healthy environment for the people who work there and for members of the public who visit it. It'll be a massively more energy efficient and therefore cost effective to run. It'll be carbon neutral, which is exactly what we need to do if we are to meet our zero carbon emissions goal as soon as possible. and it provides an exemplar for what can be done to retrofit existing substandard buildings to bring them up to the modern standards for sustainability. So I think, as I say, it's an exciting project that we should support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ross. Do we have a second?
Holden.
Councillor Holden.
Yes, I concur with everything that Councillor Ross has said. Knowing the area very well, it's in my ward. It is quite an ugly building, the one we see at the moment, and I think anything would be an improvement on this, but this is really forward looking, and I do support this application. I second the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have proposal on the floor, seconded. We now move into debate. Do we have any?
Wicks.
Councillor Wicks.
Yes, Chair. I'm afraid I won't be supporting the proposal on the floor. I don't think replacing an ugly building with another ugly building is a good idea. The fact is the building is an expense this council doesn't need to undertake at the moment, and is not fit for purpose. Now, I understand those aren't material considerations. However, the impact on the local amenity is, and this is unclear in its entirety. The visual amenity is, yes, detrimental, but the impact of the additional noise from the air source heat pump, which is an unknown quantity, the additional exterior lighting, which would be required on the building to make it safe. We're in an age where women's safety in particular is of the highest paramount, and we have no specifications on that. As Nick Atkinson said, the design is subjective and will divide this committee, and unfortunately I will find myself on the side of not agreeing with the proposal on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Wicks.
Councillor Chambers.
Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Chair. The thing I find a little bit difficult to understand, the surrounding area is all sandstone. Every building in all the pictures was all sandstone, which obviously is red in colour. Now we're going to be having a building that's coming up green and other colours and the local amenity. So I'm slightly confused on it. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Possibly Councillor Martin. I'm just waiting for it to show up on my chat. Yeah, Councillor Martin.
Councillor Martin, could we have your comment?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just can't see how the building fits into the street scene at all. It has earlier was said, it looks like a Lego block built building. I have concerns about the car parking as well, but the look of the building just doesn't fit into the listed buildings in the area. It just looks out of place, so I won't be supporting this proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Lynch.
Councillor Lynch.
I won't be supporting either. Excuse me. I find it highly speculative, so I'm going to oppose it.
Thank you.
Councillor Holden.
Thank you. Just in reference to Councillor Wicks's objection because of the prospect of noise from the air source heat pump, there is a condition, I think, that prior to occupation there will be a noise assessment made of the building. If you look on page 32, the Environment Health Officers referred to that. So I would expect, you know, if there was any noise, that any excessive noise, then that would be seen to before the building was occupied. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Baker, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wicks commented that it was detrimental visually to the conservation area, but is not the existing Voreda House even more detrimental? I think we need to think outside the box, think of architectural design, this is an innovative building. An innovative design is something that is to be encouraged, even in the conservation area. The passive house standard is an industry standard for environmental benefits. I really think that we need to think very positively about this. If this building goes ahead, makes a good environment for people to work in, surely that is for the good of everybody in Penrith. A good environment in which to work means we will retain people working in Penrith rather than them all moving to Carlisle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Well, as a born and bred Penrithian, over the years we've come to accept this ugly 1960s building for what it is, and I frankly don't think that this is going to improve matters. So I am voting against the proposal.
Thank you.
Councillor Ryland.
Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Chair. I note that in the reports for debate, the officers argue that this proposal provides significant visual benefits, and much is made throughout in regard to the modern and contemporary design, and we have been asked to actually give a lot of weight to that. So I'm going to applaud the design for its carbon neutral refit, but in my opinion, it's not actually gone far enough. It is not sympathetic to the local character, and it is not visually attractive. In the briefings, I was quite excited to hear a green wall was to be incorporated, but now that I've seen the details, the green wall is just traditional planting of climbers. An opportunity arose here to go further. My definition of a green wall is different. I envisaged a vertical, planted, modern contemporary wall in the style of Patrick Blanca. This planted wall could absorb tons of CO2, fulfilling a commitment as published in our council plan. And I quote from that, Chair, under sustainability, we are aiming to store more carbon than is produced in the district, end of quote. So this would have reduced pollution. It would actually have aided air quality around the district. The vertical wall would have been a first in the northwest and would have actually brought visitors into the town to see it, and businesses would have benefited from extra trade. In my opinion, Voreda House fails to take the opportunity to improve the character and quality of the area, which is paragraph 130 on the NPPF. I'd just like to add that the traditional planting has a very bad choice. Heterohelix common tree ivy changes its characteristic when it reaches its optimum height, and it usually branches out at least 3 foot with the flowering stems. The flowers are heavily attracted to green fly, and when in flower they actually secrete a sugary substance. This falls to the ground and attracts sooty mould. And paragraph 170 of the NPPF, the development should contribute and enhance natural and local environment. I believe it fails in that. I did ask a question before. I asked who advised on the planting. Were the architects given a copy of our council plan when they were briefed? I'm not sure. If we're going to make a silk purse, let's make a very, very good silk purse so that it benefits residents and businesses alike, and it follows through on our published council plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Yeah, Chair, I just want to make a comment that in terms of determining the planning application, the relevant policy documents are the MPPF and the Eden Local Plan rather than some of the other council documents referred to therein. Councillor Ross.
Thank you. I was very interested to hear Councillor Ryland's last comments, and I just wondered, I'd just seek advice from the officer as to whether it could be included in the recommendation that perhaps a review of the planting could be considered as part of the permission put forward, particularly relating to the nature and extent of the green wall.
Thank you, Councillor. If I may just come back to that, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, councillors, is within your gift in the recommendations that you make to add or amend any conditions. There is a condition at the moment requiring the planting to take place, but if you feel that could be better going a bit further and having sort of further details to amend the plantings, absolutely, that's a perfectly reasonable recommendation and one that would be supported by officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have we no further debate?
Councillor, so can I just confirm, is that something that you would want added into the proposal?
Yes, I could confirm that I would propose to add that to the proposal.
To require
Right.
further details as to planting to be submitted, is that correct?
A review of the planting and further details of what would be appropriate wording, but to take account of some of the suggestions that Councillor Ryland's put forward.
If I may just interject that, Chair, could I not want to put any sort of words or for the resolution on behalf of Councillor Ross? Could I maybe suggest then that if the resolution is given to provide sort of delegated powers to officers to agree appropriate wording of conditions to achieve what you're requiring? Would that be agreeable to you, Councillor?
Yes, I'm just trying to think how that process would ensure that views that have been put forward are taken into consideration during that delegation process.
Well, what I would say is that the way a condition would be worded, it would obviously be a matters to be discharged prior to a certain point in time. So ultimately that would require a scheme details to be submitted to the council for approval. Now, obviously, the vast majority of those of discharge conditions don't come before members, but as this is a council-owned application, it would automatically come back to planning committee, that discharge. So ultimately, the condition would be worded to require the additional schemes, but the final judgment and decision on whether the proposals put forward, whether or not they were acceptable, would be brought back to this committee for your approval.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holden.
Yeah, just referring to the previous item there, this condition and delegated powers to officers. Councillor Ryland seems to have huge knowledge of floral and green plants and plantings and what might be useful. So maybe some of that advice could be taken into consideration, please.
Thank you. I think that's basically what's going to happen here, Councillor Holden. Yeah, Nick's nodding his head there. I think they'll probably consult with Councillor Ryland as well if he has his exact knowledge, and do it through the officer delegated powers. Am I right in saying all that?
It would come back to committee, but I just want to point out here, Chair, at this moment, obviously you do have the power to defer this application if you want to take the opportunity for officers to discuss with the applicant and agree a further condition as to the planting, and thereafter bring it back to committee on that basis.
if you think that that would be appropriate, I shall most certainly do that. I can defer the decision to be taken at another meeting to incorporate the changes. Councillor Ryland.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask the Chief Planning Officer, in the event of any changes, I'm quite happy to consult on this. Will I be able to sit on the next committee meeting when it comes back to committee because of these changes? How does the rulings happen? I'm actually only a standing deputy.
My apologies, Councillor Ryland. I may have to defer the answer to that question either to committee services or legal services, I'm afraid. I don't know the answer on that specific question. Is that something that Rebecca, you may be able to assist with?
That would just be in line with your role as standing deputy under the separate procedures set out under the Constitution for that. Obviously, in terms of whether you'd be sat still on the committee. I understand that at the moment you're here on behalf of Councillor Sari Cookson.
Yeah, as chairman, as Councillor Ryland has been involved in the in this item, I would assume that Councillor Ryland would be included in the committee if it came
would
back.
just depend, Chair, in terms of whether, because obviously at the moment Councillor Ryland, you're sitting here on behalf of Councillor Sari Cookson, so it would depend whether by the committee that this application came back to, you were still representing Councillor Sari Cookson if he was still not able to attend. I know obviously in the case where someone sits on an application and subsequently we have a committee related to that application, people may be prevented from voting, but it doesn't really work the same the opposite way. It would depend entirely whether Councillor Sari Cookson was in a position to attend or whether you were appointed standing deputy.
It was just the fact that if you're going to take in consideration the things that I've said today, surely I would have to get a vote publicly on that in the future.
I personally can't see a problem, Rebecca, because we have the only other thing I'm linking it to, my thoughts, is when there's a public site visit, we try to encourage the same members that went on the site visit to attend the meeting.
Yeah, I understand that, Chair, and that's where I do understand that. But in this instance, because Councillor Ryland is standing in for Councillor Sari Cookson, who is actually appointed to the Planning Committee,
yeah,
it depends who's able to attend at that time, and we can't dictate that. That's under the separate procedures in terms of who was appointed to Planning Committee at a time. And as Councillor Ryland is acting as standing deputy at the moment, we can't guarantee that he will be on the Planning Committee, at which point it may come back, depending where that is down the line, if you understand.
Yeah, I was just trying to simplify the matter,
yeah,
and make it so as Councillor Ryland could at least attend while that item was being discussed.
Yeah.
So as chair, I think he could do personally.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have that power to determine whether he can do. Neither yourself as chair or myself.
We'll take it as it comes.
Yeah, it's down to the councillors in terms of their standing deputies. Okay. But I think at this point, Chair, I'm just looking. We have a few comments in the chat function. I think we need to clarify. I think Councillor Martin wants to speak on the point of whether or not there is a deferral. So if you're happy to go to Councillor Martin.
Councillor Martin.
I just want to get it clear. Can we not put a condition on about instead of deferring? Can we not put a condition on about the planting rather than defer the meeting? Deal with it today.
I think
Yeah.
that's
The
what,
application. Are we dealing with the application today, or are we deferring the whole application? That's what I want to know.
Well,
Are we
even if
dealing with the application? Sorry, Rebecca.
it's all right. Even if it goes back, as Nick has pointed out, even if delegation is given to officers to agree a further condition, given the nature of the application, it would still come back for the discharge of that condition to planning committee. And I think that is what Nick set out earlier. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but I think, yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the day, members, if the option of a condition is what you would like to require, I think that's been proposed as part of the resolution, then ultimately we would agree a form of wording with the agent to secure revised further details in relation to the green wall, the different types of species, how it was being maintained, etc. That would be on the basis the application was approved, and that would be a condition to discharge at a later point in time. Now, ultimately, when that application came back in, because the applicant would still be Eden District Council, that would automatically be a matter that came back to committee. So whilst there wouldn't necessarily be involvement from members in negotiations or discussions around the specific species types, what you would have the ability to do is decide upon whether or not you felt the scheme that was put forward was acceptable or not. So that the final judgment on the acceptability or not of that final scheme, if secured through condition, would be brought back to committee and would be something that you would be able to vote upon either yes or no.
So the deferral would be the whole application.
If you decided to defer the application, then there would be no determination made. The application wouldn't be refused, it wouldn't be approved. It would just be that overall judgment would be deferred for a latter point. Now the application would come back in its existing form, just with those additional details for the plantings, which obviously would make aware to you, but there'll be no decision on the acceptability of the application made today. If you were to approve the application today, subject to condition, then what you're doing is you'll be approving the development, but those final details, which will be required at a stage to be agreed, they will come back for you for your.
So we can deal with the application today and come back with the final details. That's what I want to know.
You can. That would be the option that I think is being sort of put forward through.
Yeah, that's a good proposal at the moment.
And Council Ross's recommendation. So that's what's before you at the moment, which is to approve, subject to those conditions. That condition will come back for you.
Right. Thank you very much.
So the current proposal, which I'll just reconfirm, is from Councillor Ross to approve the application in line with officer recommendation with delegated powers to officers to agree with the applicant a condition as to further planting details. Councillor Holden, I think you have confirmed this in your subsequent comment, but can you just confirm you're happy with that amendment to that proposal as seconder?
Yes, that would
Yeah.
be okay.
Thank you. Does anyone have any further comments?
the only comments I see on the chat function, Rebecca, refers to the deferral. I think we should move to the vote.
Yeah, thank you. Just confirm, proposed by Councillor Ross that the application is approved, the delegation to officers to agree a condition as to planting. Seconded by Councillor Holden. Can you please indicate your vote by stating for, against or abstain? Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Chambers.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Holden.
For.
Councillor Lynch.
Against.
Councillor Martin.
Against.
Councillor Ross.
For.
Councillor Ireland.
Against.
Councillor Simpkins.
For.
Councillor Wicks.
Against.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
That's 6 against and 4 for, Chair. Motion fails.
Sorry.
Right, well, I'll announce that planning application 21/0017 has been refused.
No, sorry.
No, sorry, Chair.
Sorry,
Rebecca, I'll leave
that's
it to
not
you.
correct, Chair. We need a new motion.
Ah, sorry. Yeah.
So we have a proposal from Councillor Wicks.
Oh. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose this application is refused on the material consideration against Dev 5, reflecting the existing street scene. While I appreciate that there's a carbuncle there at the moment, there's no reason to replace it with an equally distracting building. I'm not going to say ugly, but I would say it was a distracting building, and the impact on the local amenity is detrimental. It's also unclear, as we have the no noise or lighting assessment, which I understand and take on board Councillor Holden's comment about the conditions. However, as per applications 2 and 3 today, we see conditions are there to be waived. Anyway, design is subjective, and I would like to propose that this proposal is refused.
Councillor Chambers, 2 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll second the proposal and fully agree with the comments made by Councillor Wicks. Thank you.
Do we have
Chair,
any comments in debate?
Yes.
Can I just before we move on to debate, Chair, can I just ask a very quick question, just to clarify with Councillor Wicks, obviously the reasons for refusal. I'm just making a note of them because obviously they will form the decision. Can I just double check, Councillor Wicks, and again, not wanting to put any words in your mouth, that you've essentially said that you feel this should be reviewed for the reasons being detrimental impact upon the character of the street scene in the area, contrary to policy Dev 5, obviously the local plan, and also the adverse impact upon local amenity, again kind of contrary to policy Dev 5. Is that an accurate reflection of the reasons?
That's correct, and it's also in contrary to the MPPF, which defines that development should be sympathetic to the local character and the surrounding built environment and landscape setting.
Thank you for that clarity.
Do we have any comments and debate on this proposal that's on the floor, councillors?
I think Councillor Holden.
Councillor Holden just had another query, Chair. It doesn't look like she's got a comment on this current matter.
Councillor Ireland, is he typing in?
Yeah, Councillor Ireland.
Councillor Ireland, do you want to speak?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Just to say, I'm just disappointed that I wasn't allowed based on the proposals. It's made me very confused, and that was the reason I voted against, because I wouldn't be given the opportunity to speak on what I'd spoken. So I'm just a bit confused with what was said prior to that.
Personally, I would have given you the opportunity to come back next time it's heard, Councillor Ireland.
Yes, but you would, but I haven't been given the opportunity, have I? Anyway, that's my comment I would just like to make, Chair. Thank you.
Can I come back to you there, Rebecca?
Because yeah, just can I point?
I think it's in my power to do that.
It's not within your power, Chair. He's here as a standing deputy on behalf of Councillor Sari Cookson, and you don't have that power to appoint them on Councillor Sari Cookson's behalf.
Just to allow him to be there for when this item's being discussed, that was all. Not necessarily the full meeting.
He's entitled to be there as any other member of the public, and also he could exercise a right to speak on the application through the same methods as is set out in the Constitution, as everyone else has the opportunity to speak also. So there's nothing preventing Councillor Ryland to exercise his right to speak in line with existing procedural and constitutional requirements. The only point that we can't guarantee is that he would be sitting on committee at such time as this application would come back to committee. So ultimately, the proposal that has just fallen was to approve the application with delegated powers for a condition, and because of the nature of the proposal, it would have come back to committee to discharge that condition. We couldn't guarantee that Councillor Ryland would be on the committee at that time. It's not within our power to do that, but he could, if he so chose, exercise his right to speak via the normal avenues. Does that make sense? So yes. I understand Councillor Ryland's frustration that we couldn't guarantee his position on the committee, but that is not that we would prevent him from speaking, because he would have the normal procedures available to him to do so on the application.
Do you understand that, Councillor Ryland?
Well, I do, but I'm with you, Chair. I'm not entirely happy, but there we go.
Right. Margaret, Councillor Clark, do you want to comment, and then we'll move to the vote?
Yeah, it will be a final comment from me on this one. Well, I've been in this situation before on planning committees when I was a deputy, and I was allowed to come back to sit on that agenda item. So I can't see any problem here.
That's how I see it personally as well. Yeah.
I expect that was due to the particular circumstances at the time and whoever you're standing in for, Councillor Clark. But all I can say at this moment in time is we should be debating the proposal on the floor, which was proposed by Councillor Wicks, seconded by Councillor Chambers, to refuse the application for the reasons above given in terms of being contrary to development DV5 and for the visual impacts on the area not having sympathy to it. At the moment, we're going off on a slight tangent. So can I ask that if there's any further comments on the proposal on the floor, they are made now.
Yes, I've got one. Can I speak?
Yes.
It's just that this could impinge on the final outcome of this agenda item, if that is followed.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please, Councillor Clark?
It could impinge on the outcome of this application.
I'm not really sure how what you're referring to there, Councillor Clark. We'll take a vote.
Well, if we have somebody else to come in next time, they might have a completely different attitude to this application. Surely we decide on it now, not wait.
We at the moment, the proposal is on the floor to refuse the application, and that is what we will be taking a vote on. So if there's further comments coming into the chat here, Chair, just bear with me. Councillor Ross has the next comment in debate.
Right, Councillor Ross, and then we're going to move to the vote.
Thank you very much. I can't support this proposal. I think this is such a retrograde step to reject an opportunity, both a financial opportunity and a practical opportunity to massively improve and transform a building that is both generally and I think universally regarded as unattractive and, as I've said before, functionally substandard. The alternatives that we would be looking for to create working space and that are we're having to decide on at every meeting are buildings on greenfield sites outside of town. We have an opportunity to massively improve and to bring into back to good use a building on a brownfield site that's already there, and which has massive benefits both to protect our countryside around Penrith, but also to make best use and most efficient use of a building that is that is already in a very good and central location in town, and is very practically located for employment purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross.
We do have a further request from Councillor Baker to speak, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. This may not be a material planning consideration, but if we reject or refuse this application, we're also de facto refusing a grant for £800,000 odd towards the refurbishment of a building that could be very useful in the future. Thank you.
That's unfortunately not a material planning consideration in the current instance, Councillor Baker.
Right. I think we better move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal proposed by Councillor Wicks, seconded by Councillor Chambers, is to refuse the application contrary to officer recommendation as being contrary to DEV5, not being synthetic to the conservation area, having a negative visual impact. When I take the vote, can you please indicate by stating for, against or abstain? Councillor Baker.
Against.
Councillor Chambers.
For.
Councillor Clark. Councillor Clark. I'll come back to Councillor Clark. Councillor Holden.
Against.
Councillor Lynch. Councillor Lynch. I'll come back to Councillor Lynch. Councillor Clark, I can see you're now with us. Please can you indicate your vote?
I vote to refuse the application.
Thank you. So that is a vote for the proposal. Councillor Lynch. Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor Ross.
Against.
Councillor Ireland.
For.
Councillor Simpkins.
Against.
Councillor Wicks.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
Against.
And can I come back to Councillor Wicks? I mean, sorry, Councillor Lynch, apologies, and ask him for his vote in the matter. He needs to take himself off mute. Or possibly, if he's, bear with me a minute. I think Councillor Lynch is trying to indicate via the chat function. But we need to give Councillor Lynch time to be able to indicate his vote.
Okay, this is Rebecca. It looks like in the message board, Councillor Lynch has said he wishes to vote for the motion. I don't know, is that I assume that would be
We do need Councillor Lynch to just confirm verbally and we did have him in the meeting before, so I'm just waiting for IT to assist him at the moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Councillor Lynch. Can you just confirm your vote, please?
I wish to vote for the motion.
Thank you. That's
Thanks,
6
Debbie.
votes. That's 6 votes for and 5 against, Chair. Motion passes.
Right, so then that means that this planning application is refused.
Chair, can I suggest a comfort break? Is that inappropriate?
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yes. Yeah, okay then, we'll have a 5-minute comfort break.
Did you approve that comfort break?